The big news this week isn't really big news in that we already knew about the working relationship between the two sides. But WWE and TNA, they took a big step towards formalizing their partnership. They've been dating for a year, but they finally made their courtship official. They finally changed their relationship status on Facebook. WWE finally put a ring on it. They finally consummated the marriage. All right, I'll stop. But per ESPN, the headline, WWE and TNA forge pro wrestling partnership. When was the last time that TNA got a headline story on ESPN? It says WWE and TNA Wrestling have struck a multi-year partnership that will see TNA pro wrestlers regularly appear on NXT programming and vice versa, WWE told ESPN on Thursday. TNA star Joe Hendry frequently appeared on NXT programming last year, culminating in an NXT championship match with Ethan Page at No Mercy. Former TNA Knockouts world champion Jordynne Grace also appeared regularly on NXT programming in 2024, highlighted by an NXT Women's Championship match featuring Grace and Roxanne Perez at Battleground. Grace was also an entrant in last year's Royal Rumble. Several NXT wrestlers also appeared on TNA Wrestling, including Wes Lee, Charlie Dempsey, and Riley Osborne. I know it feels a little lopsided, doesn't it, when you see the list of names there. We're probably going to have the TNA World Heavyweight Champion show up in the Royal Rumble this year. We've had the Knockouts Champion show up in the Royal Rumble twice. All right, the Knockouts Champion showed up on NXT just last week. Masha Slamovich was in the house. It doesn't seem to go both ways, though. Now, I mean, AEW sent Kenny Omega to Impact at one point. He was the Impact World Champion. And he defended that title on the first Rampage, if you remember, against Christian Cage. That was the night that Christian beat him for the belt. And as I recall, the Omega stuff, it did pop a couple of big numbers for TNA, but that was pretty much it. And the relationship didn't really last very long. This isn't so much about sending one or two big names for a short-term thing. Like, they're playing the long game here. Now they have formalized this, and it's a multi-year agreement. And it is still surreal to see a press release go out from WWE announcing anything with TNA. Like, just imagine something like this happening 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? There's no way. The only press release that would have been issued was WWE acquiring TNA Wrestling. That's about it. And who's to say that doesn't eventually happen? But to see it formalized like this is still very cool. And even John Cena, he got in on the fun on his Instagram page, where he's always posting pictures without any context to them whatsoever. He just puts them up and he lets people try to figure out what it means. But this morning, no context was needed. He posted a photo of the WWE logo and the TNA logo. Now, this is his final year in the ring. John Cena has never worked for TNA. I would not be surprised if he works his first TNA match this year. It's like the match with Tanahashi that I predicted when I did my prediction show, right? And that's far out there, but I had that as one of my predictions for 2025. John Cena and Hiroshi Tanahashi, that would have been a dream match for a lot of wrestling fans 10 years ago, right? A dream match in that you would have had to be dreaming to actually see it. But today, they're both doing farewell tours this year. And it would be cool to see WWE and New Japan work something out where the two of them could work together one time, even though they're not what they used to be. Triple H got Liger in that one time to work that NXT TakeOver show, that first one in Brooklyn, his one and only WWE show, and then years later they put him in their Hall of Fame. So, like, in today's wacky world of wrestling, where a lot of weird shit has happened over the last 2 years, don't think it's so crazy to see John Cena and Tanahashi in the ring together before this year is out. Right? There's an even better chance that we see John Cena at least make an appearance in a TNA ring. Now, I don't know if they would want to burn one of his, whatever it is, 30 some odd dates that they have him for on a TNA match. But Cena's a guy who could do whatever he wants. If he went to Triple H and Nick Khan and said, look, guys, you know what would be cool? This is it for me. I want to show up in the Impact Zone. Like, imagine the memes. What is John Cena doing in the Impact Zone, right? People would lose their fucking minds. But if that's what he wanted to do, even if just for the jokes, like they would work out a deal to get it done. But I don't get the impression that Cena would ever push for anything like that himself. Like he always says, like he does whatever he's told to do. He's never lobbied. This is what he claims. He has never in his entire career ever has he lobbied for a match. Like I want to face this guy. I have to face that guy. You got to make this happen. Like he claims that's never been the case. And probably more so now. He just shows up and whatever they come up with for him, he'll do it. Like I don't see him barging in. Okay, guys, this is how it's going to be. Like, you know, Rock coming down from Rock Mountain. I don't get the impression that that's what he does. But if he wanted to, they're not going to say no to John Cena. But as far as this deal is concerned, what does it do? What it does is it continues to give reps on TV to NXT talents that may not be getting a lot of them right now. It gives WWE a pipeline to new talent. You know, for TNA, it's pretty clear what they get out of it. They get to work with the biggest wrestling company on the planet and give their fans exposure to their product. Their fans, meaning WWE fans, exposure to their product that they otherwise would never get. Certainly not on Access Television. Yeah, the main WWE account on X, they just tweeted this morning. They were promoting the TNA pay-per-view tonight. You know, this show tonight is probably going to do more buys than all but maybe one or two shows in the 20-plus year history of this company. And they're going to sell more tickets to some of their shows, right? There was an uptick in ticket sales when they started working together last year. So it benefits them in that way as well. It also allows for TNA stars to get exposure on WWE television. Like, how they're used is a separate issue, of course. That could be a plus, that could be a minus. But it's still exposure that TNA would kill to have. Well, they have that now. They also have two pay-per-views this year, don't forget, in big buildings that they have to fill. One in Los Angeles on April 27th, and the other one right here in New York on July 20th. They're running the UBS Arena on Long Island for Slammiversary. Those are big buildings. Like the one in LA, I think, is around 10,000. UBS, for wrestling, you're looking at probably max capacity for a wrestling show, at least 12 to 15. I know it can fit more than that, but you have to account for the stage and all that. Let's say 12 to 15,000, right? Those are big buildings. I don't see how TNA is going to come anywhere close to that right now, but if WWE talent is on the show, and if they could get even one big name, like an AJ Styles, to have a big homecoming, AJ Styles returns to TNA. I mean, if he could work a match with Mara Fuji for Pro Wrestling Noah last year, then he could work a fucking match in TNA one more time. Right? That could help them draw a few thousand fans that they would never have been able to draw on their own. I don't care how talented a roster they have. It's not a slight on the roster. That roster, though, is not drawing 10,000 people without something big on that show. And if the goal isn't to do double digits in attendance or somewhere close to that, then why even run a building of that size in the first place? I mean, we've seen AEW do this time and time again. One of the things I liked about Impact, one of the things I liked about Dynamite this week, yeah, it was a small, intimate venue in Cincinnati, but I kind of dug it. You know, it almost kind of gave off a little bit of a Hammerstein vibe, but that's the sort of thing they need to be doing because the reality of the situation is in a lot of places right now, outside of their pay-per-views and really big events, AEW simply cannot sell that many tickets. They just can't do it. The numbers don't lie. You see what they're doing. 1,300 people here, 1,600 people there. 2,400 people there. That's week to week pretty much in line with what they can do, but they'll run these bigger NBA-sized buildings that can fit 10, 15, 20,000 people. They won't even fill it at half capacity. And you can tell on TV, and it's fucking depressing to watch. So you don't book buildings like that unless you think you can fill them in pretty well. So this is TNA betting on the fact that being in business with WWE is better for their bottom line and for their brand than not being in business with WWE. By the way, they also signed a new TV deal with Sportsnet in Canada last month, which is huge for them. Episodes of Impact started airing on Sportsnet 360 at the beginning of this year. Every Thursday, 8 to 10 p.m. Sportsnet is the largest sports network in Canada. And WWE was airing its content on Sportsnet for about 10 years before they began shifting content over to Netflix. that's what opened the door to another promotion to make a deal with them. And supposedly AEW had an interest in making that deal with Sportsnet because why would they not? I don't know if they ever had formal discussions, but TNA got the deal instead. And it's their biggest television exposure since they lost Spike TV. And how many years ago was that, right? At least a decade. So between the Sportsnet deal, formalizing this WWE arrangement, these big pay-per-views that they're running this year, and talk of them doing more live Impact shows. In fact, they may be running live in Orlando next month for TV. Orlando, you say? Gee, I wonder why Orlando? But with all of these things going on, TNA is positioned to have a great year if they can back it up creatively. Right? They stand to lose a lot of talent. They already lost a bunch of names at the end of last year. I know Speedball Mike Bailey is gone. The belief is he's on his way to AEW. Rhino left. There were a bunch of other people who left too. Mustafa Ali, although I don't think Ali has worked a match for them since the summer. But he did very well in his time there. I don't think he's officially affiliated or under contract with them anymore. And we've already talked about the names that are likely out the door in these next few months. So it all comes down to creative. And if they can come up with a hot story or one of their stars can get hot the way that Joe Hendry did last year, then the pieces are in place for them to have a very good 2025. Now, putting on my conspiracy theory hat for a second, I cannot help but wonder if part of this from the outset last year when this all started, when this relationship first came to be, and I know they had Mickie James in the Rumble when she was the Knockouts champion, and that was 3 years ago. So it's not like this was the first time they've ever worked with TNA. That was one cameo, though. I cannot help but wonder if this did not have to do with the fact that they saw it, WWE saw it, as a potential leg up for them in recruiting future free agents away from Tony Khan and from AEW by making it more enticing for talents who may look at this and go, hey, look, they've got a relationship with TNA. I can work for TNA and still work indies if I want to, but now they've got the WWE connection too. Because I could work AEW and do indies also, but they don't have that WWE connection. So maybe I get a look from them, or maybe I get to show up here and there in NXT and get exposed to that audience, and eventually I could end up there. It was AEW that started this Forbidden Door stuff in the first place, and they started working with New Japan and then CMLL. Open borders. It's all about open borders here in wrestling. That was their policy. We're willing to work with other promotions where WWE was never willing to do that, right? At least none that had TV. They were not willing to work with anybody that had television under Vince McMahon. How much of this is derived out of what I'll call the AEW effect, and how much of it is simply Triple H and Nick Khan have a very different approach to things than Vince McMahon did, where with Vince, it was always, this is our sandbox and we don't play with others. We don't play well with others. I think it's a little bit of both. I absolutely believe that there is the AEW effect at work here. Absolutely. TNA has been around since 2002. Okay, that's over 20 years. And now WWE decides to forge this working relationship with them. Why? Because WWE just suddenly recognizes how it could benefit both sides? Like, give me a fucking break. They realize how it can benefit them. And if that means not only getting reps for some of the underused NXT talents, but giving them a pipeline to future stars that they can lure away from the competition. And they are still very much in competition with AEW when it comes to the talent pool that's out there. Then they're willing to play ball and put some shine on a product all of a sudden that they know poses no real threat to them. And it goes both ways. With AEW and New Japan, it's been a pipeline for Tony Khan too, to get Okada and to get Will Ospreay and to get Jay White and get them on some of his shows. And when their contracts were up, he just blew them away with an amazing offer so they would come work for him and not WWE. That's a big part of why New Japan is in rebuilding mode right now, right? Not only is the old guard aging out, you look at Tanahashi and you look at Naito, these guys are getting older, but they lost their biggest stars. Tony got them all. He got Okada, he got Ospreay, he got Ibushi, he got Jay White. Now Ibushi has been a bust, but he got them all. What did WWE get? They got Tama Tonga, and they got Hikuleo, who we still have not seen on TV yet. So it goes both ways. Now, I've seen the narrative also out there on social media around whether this will help make TNA the number 2 promotion behind WWE. Does this make TNA number 2 now in wrestling? Last I checked, AEW just got a $600 million media rights deal. Last I checked, AEW was still pulling around 600,000 viewers, give or take, on TBS on Wednesday nights. And they simulcast their shows now on Max, which is a pretty big deal for them. Last I checked, even some of the least attended AEW shows still had higher attendance numbers than most TNA shows. Okay? It's about more than just visibility and being BFFs with WWE. And I wish people would stop for a second and actually use their brains. Without those things, TNA is not going to be the number 2 promotion in America. And if they are ever going to get there again, because they were number 2 at one point. If they're ever going to get there again, the number one thing they need to do, above all else, is get on a better television station. Because on Access TV, it is hidden away from most of the world. And I know that Anthem owns Access. It's their network, and Impact is probably the crown jewel of that network. And so I don't even know if they want to have discussion. I don't know why they wouldn't. You would think maximizing the visibility and exposure for your product is what matters most, but so long as they're stuck on Access TV, nothing is going to change. That more than anything is what is hindering their growth. And so as long as that's the case, they have no chance at being number 2. If WWE can help with that, I don't know what they can do personally. Like, they're not going to go out and start lobbying and trying to negotiate a TV deal for TNA. But if the added exposure of this working relationship can help lead them to a better TV deal, so that the next time if the Anthem executives go into a business meeting with one of these big networks, they could say, hey, look, we've got this partnership with WWE over here. That might make the product more attractive. That's where it could be very beneficial as well to TNA. They may curry more goodwill with the fans at a time when a lot of people are looking down at AEW in a negative light. There's a lot of negativity around AEW right now, and a lot of it deserved. Just because, people are down in the dumps on AEW and maybe they aren't on TNA does not make TNA number 2. Or that they're anywhere close to moving the needle in that direction. I already had Joe Hendry figured into the Men's Royal Rumble match months ago. That was one of my predictions for 2025 on the podcast last month, that Hendry, he finally wins the TNA World Heavyweight title at Genesis, and he would be a surprise entrant in the Rumble match. And I felt even better about that after he was announced for the Jericho Cruise, because the Jericho Cruise falls the same time as the Rumble. But they made it very clear that Hendry would not be joining the cruise until the day after the Rumble. So the cruise set sail on January 31st. The Rumble is on February 1st. Hendry is not boarding the ship until February 2nd. Gee, I wonder why. So I think we get that. I think we get Jordynne Grace back in the Women's Rumble this year, but this time as a full-fledged member of the WWE roster. This deal also opens it up for other cameos in the Rumble. Right, for someone like Jeff Hardy, because they got the Hardy Boys under contract in TNA. Matt Cardona has made no bones about the fact that he wants to go back to WWE. He wants to be in the Royal Rumble. He's ready. He's got his gear ready. He's going to be in town for the big convention, so that's possible. It offers opportunities also to talent like Mike Santana, who has been busting his ass all year. He's wrestling Josh Alexander in an I Quit match tonight. And he's going to win that match because Alexander is on his way out. I think they have big things planned for Santana in 2025. I would love to see him make appearances on NXT and maybe eventually get a deal out of it. I mentioned Masha Slamovich made a cameo on NXT last week. Tessa Blanchard. I said it when they brought her back. If she can keep her head down and steer clear of any new controversy, WWE will absolutely give her a look at some point and bring her in if they feel like it's safe to do so, right? This is like a trial run for her being back in TNA. The WWE brass are watching very closely. She works for TNA. TNA now works with WWE. You do the math. Okay, it's all set up for her if she plays her cards right.